wait till those people sit down. Ron, okay?
Whenever you're ready.
Welcome to Inside New York's Art World. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein, and with us today is photojournalist Cornell Capa, director and founder of New York's only museum devoted to photography, the International Center of Photography. From the Great Wall of China and the Six-Day War in Israel to the campaign coverage of John F. Kennedy and Adlai Stevenson, Capa and camera have brought us truthful images that communicate on an artistic level. A photographer who believes in using art criteria for photography, he has demonstrated that photos can be taken out of the magazine and put into the museum. Very warm welcome to you, Cornell.
Thank you for a lovely introduction. But is it all true?
That's what you're going to tell us. Is it all true?
I think so.
Me too. A little more than 4 years ago, a long-term hope, dream, fantasy of yours was given shape and form in reality. The International Center of Photography, a museum which you founded, opened. How did that idea all start? How did it all come about?
Well, the beginning was simple. First of all, of course, I was just a working photographer for 1946. I joined life after the war, and my brother, who most of the people know about, is Robert Capa, killed in Indochina in 1954. He and my friend Werner Bischoff died the same day in May of 1954. I left behind them a body of work, which suddenly I realized that somebody had to do something with. So that whole question of what happens to photographers' work after they're gone, stuff that was published in magazines, not published in books, would not be seen in exhibitions, would not be collected any place because no museum collected them. Whatever I say tonight, of course, has a great amount of, you have to put yourself back in time, not because things have changed that tremendously to date.
But they have.
They have some, but not that much. My point is that in 1954, this was a fantasy of publishing in books. It was fantasy to be collected. It was fantasy to be maintained, archived, and republished and seen. So suddenly I found that this material was sitting around, and who is going to do anything with it? Part of it was simple. I was around. I was doing my brother's work easy enough. Rosalina Bischoff, the widow of Bischoff, was getting active and sort of herself was doing some more work with his material. And slowly it became very evident that it was not my brother, it wasn't Bischoff, it was later, 2 years later, David Seymour was killed. Three years later, Dan Weiner was killed, different kind of situations. And suddenly you start looking around at the number of people who have disappeared, whose work was nowhere. And out of that realization and my personal commitment to some of the people involved, I started to make exhibitions that traveled around. I started to make monographs of their work. And suddenly I realized, of course, it was much bigger than those 5, those 6, but it was all of us, including myself, eventually, whenever. And out of that realization came the idea of having a fund that would take care of photographers' work, to bring them to the public, make their work be collected into between covers, having it shown internationally in different places, so people could not only realize the quality of their work, but their message, as if it were. And out of that whole thing, by 1974 became the realization that maybe there should be a place where they should all emanate from. I should say that my idea was marvelous originally. But 1966, I did a great body of work of all these people, And I used everybody else's facilities. I had a series going at NYU, lecture series and a teaching series. I used commercial publishers to take our books and publish them. I used the Riverside Museum, the Jewish Museum, the Metropolitan Museum for places to show. I had a real institution without walls, which I enjoyed tremendously because I had no problems what I have today. I mean, I was totally clear about one thing, and if I did not have janitor expenses, then I could spend my whatever money I could get. It would be on producing work. However, our mutual friend Carl Katz, who was Jewish Museum director at that time, and later on he moved over to the Metropolitan Museum where he still is, told me, Cornell, you're crazy. You're producing all these things all over the world and everywhere else, and you spend all this tremendous energy in spreading the word, spreading the image and all the rest of it and the understanding of it. But until you're going to a place where it's really going to have a place where it's going to come out from, you're wasting your time, you just melt away. And unfortunately, I listened to him. Mm-hmm. And the International Center of Photography was born. And since then I have trustees. Since then I have applications by the millions.
Deficits.
They're somewhat diminishing.
That's good news. Well, the museum is now housed in a fine landmark building, the former Audubon House on 5th Avenue and 94th Street. How did you select that building? And being in a landmark and such a distinguished building, does it present any particular problems, or does it have any real advantages for you?
Well, it's a marvelous building. That's the best I can say for it. Willard Straight built it for his family, and he lived in it a very short time. It was built in 1915, and the elevator is as much of a landmark as the building is. Things leak. And it's a beautifully proportioned wood-paneled, wonderful rooms, which of course fight the photographs that you put in. For about 3 years, we were very respectful of the walls, and we developed a hanging system which would not touch the wall and would be away from the wall, giving it a two-dimensional effect of some sort. It was very complicated to do that, and the brown tonality of the wall did not suit all the photographs that were put in front of it.
And now what do you do?
Well, we have created a false wall in front of the wall, up to about 12 feet height. So the original building is still visible all over the place above eye level. And the rest of it we can paint as we go along. We have not originally, for the first 2.5 years, we did not put in walls inside, infrastructures. Mm-hmm. Now we do all of that. We covered up the fireplaces. I mean, suddenly...
I don't know if you should be telling me this.
Oh, that's perfect. We didn't kill them. We just put them away.
But they remain intact.
They're intact, but they're not interfering anymore with the showing of photographs. And I think we have found now for the last year, more or less, we found a very nice combination of keeping the old and using it new. And so that part is very good. We have DC current, AC current. We have windows which cannot be touched because the whole things happen. It's an amusing place from the point of view of living in a wonderful house. We have 2 interns who live in the house at 1130 Fifth Avenue. Is a very marvelous kind of an address, and they have a penthouse where they cook. They have a terrace where they overlook the city. And it's quite nice for them, but for the rest of us, it's a little bit different.
It's only in the last 20 years, as you've mentioned, that photography has become known to a general public. Was there any particular event or circumstance that caused that kind of breakthrough?
Well, it is not even, well, if you count the 20 years,
I'll count to 30 if you...
Well, if you count 25, maybe it's better. Steichen's family of men did something. Museum of Modern Art, of course, ran since 1940 a photographic department.
It was Alfred Barr who first wanted that department in the museum.
And it's
long before it was thought of as a precious or art form.
Well, that went very well, and they had distinguished people who were the curators.
Who were some of them?
I think Beaumont Newhall was one of them, and then Steichen came into the picture. And Steichen was a fantastic showman, besides being photographer, being everything else. And then he created his Family of Men exhibition, an idea of his own theory, the whole idea what the family of men is one. And he collected for the photographer's work, it spelled out a theme. It was his theme. He used photographs as words of different length. And everybody who had a picture in the exhibition was very proud that he had a picture in the exhibition, although it made no difference whether he used my comma or his punctuation mark. Made no real difference from point of view. Well, to a picture in an exhibition like that, you just serve a purpose. You certainly do not...
The theme maker's purpose rather than the photographer's purpose.
Correct. But the exhibition was designed and installed in a very fantastic kind of a way, not used as flat pictures on the wall. And it was a smash from a point of view, popular...
unprecedented public attendance.
Right. And it brought the popularity of photography into the picture. And it established photography of a certain sort within museum walls. To a degree, ICP's photographic programs and exhibitions have a kind of resonance to what he did, because he did not use photography as an art form particularly. He used it as a communication form, visual communication form. Now, this has only a certain amount of resonance to me. Yes, I'm very much addicted to photography that brings visual messages. I do like to show photographs on a wall, not in a straight line of pieces, one after the other. On the other hand, by 1978 and 1979, the aesthetics of showing photographs changed considerably in the last 10 years. And all exhibitions are not message exhibitions, nowhere including us.
Well, you evoked at the time that the museum was founded the words of the pioneer documentarian Louis Hine, words that he used more than 50 years ago to describe the purpose of the museum. Could you tell us in his words and in your words what you envisioned then, and does that still hold true for the purpose of the ICP?
Well, it still holds true completely because he holds true. The statement he made was that the two things I wanted to do, things to be appreciated and things to be corrected. I think on that double axis you can go right down the line to do that. I still believe in the same, except of course the public acceptance and public appreciation of photography as a quote-unquote art form, and appreciation for the single artistic photograph, a creation, became very much an accepted newer notion. And being a general institution as well as a specific committed institution to the Louis Hine notion, we are doing it both in some very liberal kind of a way. I discover old forgotten collections and old forgotten photographers. I bring the world in from anywhere, photographs and photography of other places which normally would not be shown in the United States. And at the same time we're showing some series like the Inside series of Bill Ewing's, were Mapplethorpe, Lynn Davis, and Metzger.
Those are the new talents
The
that
new
you are
talents, yes.
discovering.
And it's over my dead body, but it's happening.
Well, it can't happen in spite of you. You must be supportive of that.
Well, I have a director of exhibitions who's
This is
addicted.
Mr. Ewing.
Who is addicted to these new things, and
You take a dim view of it?
not dim, but we live happily alongside. Somehow it works.
Well,
He keeps out of my way, and I keep out of his.
it seems that almost everyone can make a beautiful photo. Everyone is a photographer, from the most mundane to the most artistic. It's a question that I've often discussed and certainly often considered. I don't know anyone who hasn't. How do you determine what is really a good picture? When does the image deserve and when does the image sustain the basic definition of what can be considered fine art?
Well, I'd like to go back one more thing before we get into that. Before we get into that one, the second thing, of course, is 1967. I did the Concerned Photographer exhibit at the Riverside Museum.
What?
The Concerned 67, a Concerned Photographer. It was a Riverside Museum, and it was a family of men of a sort, but it wasn't, because I showed the work of 6 photographers as a body of work. It was their view of the world, not mine. I didn't use them as single pieces. It was their exhibitions which then expressed the concerns of the photographers shown. And it was the same idea that the 6 of them together did show us a concern about mankind, but it was their concern and not necessarily mine. My job was only to put them together as individual unit and edit them down to a acceptable size, single one-man, 6 one-man shows together. And from that point on, from 1967 on, is the birth of the galleries, the idea of photographs being bought and collected. And in 67, there were 2 part-time, nighttime galleries down
Lee
here.
Whitkin.
No.
By 1968, Lee Whitkin.
By
was here.
1968, but not in 67.
Then who was it?
Something called the Exposure Gallery, and there was one other one ran by a Swiss man who was a camera repairman, who was addicted to photography to the degree that he had a gallery purely not for
How
selling.
about the magazines? Was Life and Time, were they having their own photo galleries at that time?
No, well, Life.
And how influential were they in developing photographers?
None from the point of view.
Gave them work and sustained them? No?
None from the point of view of showing them as art. They had all the responsibility for developing the form, the storytelling form, and
Of photojournalism.
yes, but it had all kinds of different people doing different things. Like Leonard Macomb did the poetry of whatever. It didn't have to be exactly a documentary photojournalism. Anyway, but by 1968, with the coming of Whitkin and other galleries in town, the whole scene has changed. Following that, 1972, when the mass magazines died, Look and Life, Saturday Evening Post, Collier's, they all went out of business, and then suddenly a whole new era began. The art business wasn't very healthy, I understand, and suddenly they discovered that vintage prints and a new art form, quote unquote, was around, and it was collectible, it had value, it may have had much value. Prints that you could buy for $15, $20, $25 and $100, suddenly we get to Paul Strand, whose one print goes for $10,000. The revolution of discovering the collectible value thing with photography only really in this country is 1968 on.
Does it have precedence elsewhere? Was it collected in France or England?
It's much less than here. So they're about 10 years behind there. So whatever we have now in a public, collecting appreciative public is really we're ahead of it in the United States. And the auctions, Park Sotheby did some in England, but then it came over here. And it's a whole new ball game. Let's
hold that in abeyance till we go back to the fact that everyone does take a picture. There's one in every family. But what makes it art?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, still I read somebody's column, because you keep on the reversions and revulsions. They still don't think it is. The people who are really in the art world, they still don't want to really accept photography as art. Whatever the meaning of that expression really is, but whether money value is one that makes it art or not, whether a subject is necessary or not. The famous pen photographs at the Metropolitan Museum, where he did his objet trouvé, kind of a large blow-ups of things, where he definitely wanted to prove that subject was totally unnecessary. It's some kind of a compositional and textural value that made those photographs to be photographs and works of art. Now, it's a very difficult kind of a thing to, I find it quite unacceptable to do photographs without subject.
I thought there was still an idea that documentary photographs are not subjective enough, that they are not personal.
Well, you can run the gamut any which way anybody wants. I mean, if you take the same 10 people looking at the same subject or object, we'll have 10 different views of it. And which one is more interesting from a point of view of composition, of concept, of looking at it. The personal input, because a Cartier-Bresson photograph you do recognize because of its compositional value, its recognition of the moment, the decisive moment when everything falls together, the tension in the photograph. A lot of people are totally unready, unable to even conceive that is necessary. The wonderful part about photography is that you recognize, you can identify with it one way or the other. A family picture, a great family picture, could be a joy in a family. Some of the great photographs taken by great professionals or great artist type of photographers would still be the same nature. And a man at home says, my goodness, this picture mine is as good as his. Slowly and very fast, of course, you have a tremendous amount of imitation, conscious and unconscious imitation. People are, everybody is a Sunday painter, but a much more successful Sunday painter. A Sunday photographer can be much more successful than a Sunday painter is.
And that's precisely for one of the reasons that not altogether mindless formulations by the fine art world still tend to view photography as something that is chemical and duplicatable and mechanical. And they question the fact, is a camera a tool in which to duplicate images? Or do you measure artistic talent in photography when its quality depends upon the chemical or the technical knowledge of the photographer? How do you reply to all of that, Cornell?
Well, partially it's very simple, really, on many levels. I have an easier position than many others who would have to answer this wonderful one. One of them is, of course, that lately you don't hear much about the chemistry and the lens anymore. I mean, we have gone over that one. Somehow the old chestnut is not being paraded anymore, that it's chemistry, and nobody's asking whether the painter's hard edge or the quality of the paint, maybe there's something chemical there also. This is not anymore an interesting way of discussing the artistic merit, because it has chemistry involved in it. That doesn't seem to matter anymore. I think maybe the value, the actual money value, solved that problem. it's a shortcut, but it works. The other thing
Just may have submerged it rather than solved it.
Oh, it submerged it, but it's all right. It's such a tiresome question at this point, from not in our context, but that one. I mean, you don't even want to spend time on discussing that.
But a wave of the hand really isn't enough.
Of course not. but maybe I can get by with it. Using a typewriter and using words, it's very tiresome to get a piece of a Hemingway novel is using the same typewriter, the same words that I write.
But it's the combination. So you're suggesting is the composition in either the mind of the writer or the eye of the photographer.
That's why I have a much easier time to deal with it, because for me photographs speak. They together speak longer and better, and they can be much more sweeping than the individual artistic composition of a still life on a table.
Well, that makes an external factor, the viewer, even more a part of the creative process than the evaluation of any other art form.
The difficulties, I think, some of the difficulties, what our effect on our world, our effect on the rest of the arts. The portrait photographer, the portrait painter went out of business. The landscape artist went out of business. All the realist painters sort of went out of business.
They're coming back into business.
But because now they're improving our photographs.
Do you think of photorealism as photography or art?
You answer that.
Depends upon the painter. And that's not good enough either, that old ploy. Is photorealism photography or art to you?
Maybe neither. Most likely that's the answer. I mean, I felt there was an exhibition at the Riverside Museum following one of concerned photographer. It was the first time that I suppose this photorealist came into, and they repainted everything. They had the original picture, the photograph, and they recomposed it, and they made it to be in their perspective, and they emphasized whatever they wanted to emphasize, and suddenly there was art. Well, it burnt my eyeballs, and I was so mad because suddenly the photograph was not good enough. They had to recompose it, change the perspective of it, and suddenly because they painted it, it became art. Well, I didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now.
But there is indeed an accidental nature, even to the finest photographer who crops in the camera. There is still an accidental nature to some aspect.
Oh, I don't disclaim that for 1 minute.
Well, what does Cartier-Bresson mean when he talks about objective chance?
Well, one thing he does not do. Let's leave it at that. These are all different disciplines. His discipline is that if you cannot do it by the moment when you compose it in a camera, and you capture that tension which is in all the different elements, light and all, in his photograph, then it's just, you missed it, finished, throw it in a basket. So
it's either the Pulitzer Prize winning photograph or not at all?
In his case it is, but he has a very high standard for himself of what it is. Then the black frame mania began. That if it's not exact.
Are we about to emerge from that black frame mania?
Somewhat, but also the second mania is that if there isn't enough light, you don't take pictures. Artificial light or light to make available light available enough. Then you don't, if there is no light, you take no pictures. It doesn't exist. Well, that's another one.
As a photograph.
As a photograph, yes, and you just don't do it. Well, that's also a chestnut because it just takes out half the world from your subject or whatever matter.
Tell us what tomorrow's chestnuts are going to be. What is the current preoccupation?
I don't know. I have to talk to Bill Ewing.
There's obviously an episodic nature to it all. What is the current mode? What is the current fashion in photography? And I've said a terrible word which I'm going to address myself to in a moment.
Well, the main thing really is that color is making its entrance. All the chestnuts.
But that's not brand new, hasn't that been the last
Oh yes,
several
no, it's very brand new. Number one, nobody showed color because color is unstable. Number one, it will disappear in whatever number of years, depending on whatever the conversation was about. And all the same chestnuts against photography were triply true about color photography.
Is that true?
To a great extent, it's true not only from the disappearance point of view, but color is very hard to control and use well. The postcard, of course, who can speak against postcards when the instant aesthetics are in? Snapshot aesthetics could be postcards. So eventually that can also change. But the color photograph is very hard to use well, artistically, different from some view that you are too much used to. It really is a reproduction of what it is. And that's not very interesting on level A. Mm-hmm. Now, National Geographic for many years, like since 1950, they only use color. All their issues are full color. And their photographers are very journalistic photographers, mainly from the newspaper background.
Certainly, Time and Newsweek have been using more and more color pages over the last several years, and that is an influence.
But stay with the Geographic because their pictures are better, and they're using them much more as nearer to some kind of a good photography. Mm-hmm. And what happens with their work is that they cannot change. See, in black and white photography, we have a tonal system. You can reflect mood by your printing, because printing you can control, and you can, with the black and white, you can create mood with your using of the color, of the black and white scale. In color, you can't do that. We have not quite discovered how to make moody color photographs unless put some phony filters on, and you change the whole atmosphere, and it's nothing anymore. So how to get away from a postcard? Pure reproduction of color as is.
So then the critic Robert Hughes is quite right. He says the obsessive problem of photography is not how to make good pictures, but how to make true pictures.
Well, to make true pictures is easy, within the limitations of what...
Well, why does that differ from what you are saying?
True pictures is a picture postcard. I mean, it's not true because, of course, you took only this part of the scene and not the whole scene. You selected some part of it, okay? It's true, but it's not interesting necessarily at all, because it's not subjective. It's just haphazard way of presenting something that's in front of your eye lens camera. How to make it to be an artistic photograph, how to make it to be subjective, your view, and how to get some mood into it, your mood, your view. We can't do that with color. We have not found a way to make it subjective.
And the new wave in color photography, have they found a way?
Not really. They fool around with 8 by 10 size color, which means that suddenly you have a whole different sharpness from corner to corner, and straight lines. It has nothing to do with anything else, really. It's just technically they change something around, and they say this is beautiful. When you look at it, you see, yes, it is sharp from corner to corner, but then what? But that's not changing anything. It's just a lot of experimentation is going on in color, however, and most probably that's where the action is going to be for a little while to come.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Are there any great new technological breakthroughs?
Well, again, it's the same problem what I told you about. We did many adventure things at the center. I want to respond to that a little bit, because you mentioned the museum before. Well, I have a center/museum that we are running.
Is it an educational institution, an archival institution, an exhibition space?
We do everything what a museum is supposed to do, but we call it a center because it leaves me freer to do everything I want to do. And we can be much more adventurous than as a center than a museum would be otherwise. Also, I'm quite interested in not dead objects. I'm very much alive. And so museums have a connotation which sort of connotes something else. Back to, I lost my track.
The museum.
I'm back to the center. Well, I have to refine it. I don't know. I got lost there. But I'm sorry. I know what I wanted to do. One of our first exhibitions, the first summer for which I really got knocked by Hilton Kramer, to have shown holography, the first decade of holography.
Why did you do that?
Well, because it was new and exciting and it was possible.
That was the technological breakthrough. That's why you forgot it, because of that negative criticism.
No. It was terrific because I had a phone call from the New York Times one day, and I don't get a phone call from the New York Times very often, and the voice said on the other side, would you like to respond to Hilton Kramer's column? I said, I haven't seen the column.
I remember that column, and I remember that reply, and I think it was after, no, I'm actually thinking of a later one, and that is when you showed the work of Munkazi.
No, that was that's a different story.
That's another saga of the same kind, and that's when I said before, I said the word fashion, and I think I'd like to focus on that for a moment.
Getting back to holography, though,
Okay.
because having given it a platform for something that was coming, which has not reached the level of development where it may have been ready for a museum, but it was certainly ready for my center. Okay? And the crowds just flocked in, and his attack was good, and my response was, got the same space as here on the front page of Sunday, whatever it was. And suddenly there was a wonderful discovery of ICP as a center of photography. And as a result of it, now there is a museum of holography in New York, because based on their success up there, they were able to start a new thing, and they have done very many good things ever since. So holography, I think, has a tremendous, tremendous possibility, not for, maybe for the artist more, not for the documentary, but who knows that. Back to you.
When you say not for the documentary, I'm thinking of a criticism that was written after the Munkazi exhibition, when it was said that the high moral purpose of the center seemed to, in some respect, perhaps it was losing its way because of either popular or economic constraints. Was that an appropriate kind of exhibition for the ICP? Is fashion photography art?
It didn't make any difference to me. Number one.
Because I recall your reply to that criticism too.
Well, it was very simple again, because I really started out with something quite different. You asked before what criterion for choosing and all that. Well, my criteria is still rather humanistic. That particular photographer, Martin Munkaci, was a photojournalist of the 1925 Germany, etc., development of the first period of...
In Budapest?
Well, he came from there, but he was in Germany and part of the Münchner Illustriert and all those magazines. And he was an action photographer. He loved sports, and he was not particularly a fashion man at that time. They brought him to America, and Carmen Snow of Harper's Bazaar saw his work, and suddenly she realized that fashion needed some action. And
you suggesting he was the first jumper and leaper of fashion photography?
Avedon's father. I mean, he was a predecessor of Audubon, and Audubon acknowledges tremendous debt to Munkachi. And the point is, however, to carry that further, he, with the help of Carmen Snow and those very clever people of that period, he gave a chance for the model to be a human being and not a dress horse. It's a human being that mattered in its environment and not in a studio being pinned up. So from my point of view, the contribution of a photojournalist and the view of people being more important, the cultural and other considerations being more important than being a fashion model, was the main point of Munkachi's contribution to photography. So for me, that particular photography, that particular fashion photography, a cultural reflection to our time, whatever the time or the period is. Now I'm changing my tune some.
I think so.
Well, that's perfectly all right, but please, because I was right on at least two grounds. One, what photojournalism did by humanizing fashion photography in that particular instance, which is one line. The second line, that fashion photography is a cultural thermometer of our time. So you can certainly continue that investigation into the value of fashion photography as artistic photographs. And of course, that, from Steichen's work from 1910 on, the stuff is valid. Is theater photography, art photography. The photographs of Steichen of those portraits of his period are fantastic. You can carry that kind of discussion on many, many directions. Also with my darling friend, my new director of exhibitions, he's doing a Hoyningen-Hune exhibition. He is now using the other stick, measuring stick, not mine. Munkachi was my measuring stick because I wanted to use his work as a photojournalist who humanized fashion photography. For Bill Ewing, Hoyningen was an elegant photographer who reflects his time, and his photographs are elegant, and the times are reflected, and the photographs have artistic value. So ICP now, the next one to be defended will be his.
And how will you answer those?
I'm allowing Bill Ewing to answer that one.
That's his.
That's his.
But as I recall, you went further in your reply to the Munkachi exhibition. You said the primary purpose of the museum is still the documentary photograph.
Oh, but that goes without saying because I'm doing that. I'm continuing that line of exhibitions all the time, except that I have the young conceptual photographers also being shown, the fashion photographers being shown. I think we are now collaborating with another institution, curating a show on advertising photography and its history. Can you believe that?
Are you going to do that with the Museum of the
No.
New York Historical Society?
No, outside of New York. We won't mention names.
Why not?
Well,
why would they not do it within their own resources?
They thought we would do a good job of it, and they have no curator.
So you are the guest curator of another museum's exhibition.
Well, we have done that with Asia House, for one. And we did the home of the snows, the Himalayas, abode of the snows, the Himalayas. The first exhibition, first large summer exhibition at Asia House 2 years ago, was an ICP curated exhibit that they put on for summertime. They thought that it was not very good to close for the summer. And what was less expensive to produce and less expensive to guard than Far Eastern, very expensive art was photography. So they asked us to do that one. Since then, of course, they have done India, and they have done China, and the whole. We have affected the scene in New York quite a bit.
Is the advertising exhibition sponsored by an advertiser or an advertising agency?
No. First of all, we're not involved in that part at all because the original proposition and the grants and all that goes to the mother institution. So we're just really derivatives. See, you have the terrible problems of being accused of all kinds of things without even deserving to be accused.
No.
You're getting into the next chapter, which I don't know if you're going to ask. How do you stay alive?
How do you stay alive? Since every institution, performing, visual, literary, every allegedly not-for-profit institution is faced with the most severe economic constraints. And from time to time, even those with the highest of purposes, both aesthetic and moral, find themselves sponsoring or producing exhibitions that are really less than they had in mind, but willy-nilly of necessity. There they are. Are you ever faced with those problems?
I haven't done it yet.
Never?
No, I have
Are
not.
there any shows that you regret having put on?
I have not a single exhibition that I'm sorry that we have done.
Cornell? Not a single one?
Well, we had a couple of exhibitions we prepared for benefits.
That's what I had in mind.
Well, they were not exhibitions in any real...
Cameo exhibition.
No, they were up for should have been up for one night only. And they were up for 7 days. We did one on something called Moonlighting Stars. And these were the people who, famous people who also take pictures for pleasure and fun. And they have given us their photographs. And
Well, couldn't they give you their money too? Don't you think that dilutes the serious purpose of a center/museum?
No, I thought it was a marvelous idea for the party, which we had a wonderful parties. And the pictures are on the wall to be bought. If you wanted to buy a photograph by Beatrice Straight, there was a Beatrice Straight photograph of whatever she took whenever she took it, and it was very nice for her to donate it instead of her slippers. Or some other metropolitan opera
Yes. Whatever.
auctions or whatever they do. I don't think it has anything to do with the quality of the singing at the Metropolitan Opera, right? So we did
It's
one.
not held in the same space, though. It's not on the stage of the opera, nor is it to...
Well, you get into something else. The point, you're making 2 points. One, I did not make an exhibition that I really was ashamed of for other reasons. I don't consider this kind of a donated work to be auctioned or sold off to benefit the exhibition fund of ICP for a week's time to be hung by some show of that nature. I don't believe that to be an exhibition. I did not keep it up there to be presented to a reviewer to review. There was nothing to review. Same thing happened with the sport. We had a sports exhibition of the same nature, same syndrome, 1 week, etc. And I would have been happier with each one of them if it lasted one night. Then we wouldn't have gotten into this kind of a discussion. I can have a private party any night and sell the pictures, and it would be $10,000 richer for the museum's existence and its exhibition fund, and would not get into this, is it art, were you corrupted, all these questions. Money wasn't enough to be corrupted by.
Oh, so if you had a lot of money, then it would be, then it's corruption.
Well, if I would have, no, I'll tell you something, what my point really is. If I put on a regular exhibition in a 6 weeks normal slot to be presented as one of our exhibitions, and I did it for commercial, professional, money reasons, then I would have to face you with that answer. But I haven't done that.
No, I would not expect you to do that.
Well, under some circumstances, it could have happened.
Then what is your price?
High.
Were there any missed opportunities?
Well, you see, but it all depends. I have to be holier than all the thous you know. A lady who shall remain nameless paintings and photographs taken of the lady could have made an exhibition at our place because it had some validity of some sort, because she had been much photographed and much painted. some other institution presented it in some other context, and they got quite a bit of money for doing that. But nobody.
That lady was the head of a commercial enterprise.
Yes, yes.
And as a result.
We are not going to
No.
use initials either. But it depends on how old the institution is and how well it can be really covered up.
Tucked away in that museum.
And unfortunately or otherwise, which is kind of nice, I would like to say some things about that, we are so damn visible. We have only 4 galleries in a place. We show either one exhibition, which occupies all the space, or we have 2 or 3 or 4 exhibits, depending on each gallery, how to handle it. And each one of them is so damn visible that whatever we do is like a nose on my face. You can't hide it. And that's very nice because you're under terrific scrutiny. The second part is being young and foolish and watched constantly for all kinds of, are you concerned enough, are you not concerned enough? what is this fashion doing here? Why holography and so on? So I'm really watched, which is of course partially good, because I have to behave, and however I behave, it's noticed instantly. So I think it's kind of good. The second part is that we have a very extensive education program. And one of the major things we do is to have a wonderful limitation of size. All our rooms are miniature. You can only deal with 15 people, which is a perfectly good number to deal with.
How many students do you have at the museum?
You can't make money with that kind of a program, but you keep the standards high.
How many students do you have at the museum during the course of any educational cycle?
Well, we have 2 semesters, and each semester now we have about 800 people who take 800. To go back, how do you support an institution? Okay?
Yes.
Well, I've been very fortunate to 3 different directions. One of them is that we have, without selling photographs, because we're really not doing it. We're not successful even attempting to do it.
You have a bookstore and you sell some things there, don't you?
We sell in a bookstore portfolios, books from all over the world, and some magazines, and it's a good place to browse. We have the most photographic literature in any one place in New York City. People who come to ICP to look at exhibitions eventually float into the bookstore. And they have a very good time browsing and reading and loving every minute because they get a lot of information. So we do have a bookstore which just about breaks even, unfortunately. It is not making much money per se. Since the space it occupies has a certain overhead, it meets its overhead, so it meets part of our general overhead. The second part is the educational program, which again occupies several floors, and again it has an overhead. So the educational program breaks even by paying for some of the overhead. Eventually, when you finish up this kind of accounting for how we make out, by our membership program, by our education program, eventually after 3 years we started to have not voluntary contributions, but we actually charging $1 for adults, 50 cents for under 16 and students, and free for senior citizens. So from our admissions we make some money, and we curate some shows for other institutions. We earn some money. We have some royalties from books, from cars and all that stuff. We actually earn about 45 or 50% of our annual operating expenses. We earn it.
What is your annual budget?
I was afraid you're going to ask that. It crept up to about $800,000, which is just a fortune, just a fortune.
What did it start at 4 years ago?
It was a fortune also. It was about $500,000. But with inflation and all the rest of things that you can think about, and all the things that we do, we are open. Our galleries are open 6 days a week. Our education program operates 7 days a week,
From
day
11
and
to
night.
11?
The 11 to 5 is our normal gallery viewing time. We attempted to keep open some nights, but that didn't really work out very well for us. Too much money for guards, lights and stuff.
Apart from the photography workshops,
Let me tell you the rest of it. Sorry. We earn that money. We don't have our keep. Then we have a very good board of trustees that got created in the meantime, very devoted, and they all have one thing in mind: how to keep me in line. I'm known to be an artist, and artists have to be watched because they're not very good with managing money. So their preoccupation is to manage me, which suits me very well because they're very helpful. So anyway, they give us about $100,000 a year, more or less. Then New York State Art Council is giving us some money. National Endowment on the Arts gives us some money. And the greatest news of the year, of course, is that we have been found so marvelous by the National Endowment on the Arts that in the second series of challenge grant programs, on which they use some very severe measurements, we were given $200,000
as a challenge grant.
as a challenge grant. For all we have to do now is to raise $600,000 to 1, 2, 3 to make it work.
And how do you plan to do that?
We're working harder.
Do you have any specific plans, though?
Oh yes, we had to submit one. I mean, I can't go through all of that. It's a terrible.
Let me ask
terrible
you a
chore.
very specific question, and that is, aside from the photography workshops and certain aspects of the educational program, how do you describe the difference and the difference between your institution and the Museum of Modern Art and the photography department, and the need for a second institution?
Oh dear. Well, number one, each one of us have a character and a profile, and each one of them, a city, a New York City, does not need one. It may need 5 or 6 or 7 and 8. I don't
I
understand.
thought we were going in reverse these days,
Well,
that it has 8 and small may be beautiful.
Well, I don't know, but for example, I don't know the why Whitney Museum does not have a photographic component. I mean, I would rather have an explanation for that one than your question of why must we
We'll
have
ask the
two.
director of that institution that question.
Okay. The second one is, of course, very major with me, and very major with Sarkowski equally well. To do exhibitions of a certain character and nature, which is depending on the profile of the institution, the Museum of Modern Art curates all its exhibitions. It has certain space allotted to photography, which may not be the major space outside of the Steichen Center. They not often get space in the main part of the other part of the Museum of Modern Art. Therefore, their output, their yearly output of how many photographers they present is limited. Limited by choice, which is fine, limited by numbers, which is fine, and they all have to be curated by themselves. In our case, we are a window to the world. I accept shows from all over the world which are coming from well-curated, well-pedigreed places, and I don't feel that unique about that it has to be our vision only that I want to present. So I'm free and open to bringing work in. The second part is we do our own exhibitions in addition to that. And around the year, we have 22 exhibitions per year, more or less that number, because depending on every 6 weeks we have 1, 2, or 3 new shows as a changing exhibition program goes. If you put XYZ number of theirs, which is much less than that, and R22, then you still only have about 28, 29 exhibitions in New York City, which I think the city can really stand much more than that, of the quality that they or us can do We may be wide and they may be narrow, or vice versa.
You have been the director of the museum for more than 4 years, the executive director, and planned it for several years before then. You are not only known for your talent, but your energy. What would you like to be doing in the next 5 years?
Retired. I would like to. I did a lot of work before I opened the center, and I stopped taking pictures at that point. I didn't quite know how much I stopped. I had an idea that I can really go off for 2-3 months in between I do a project of mine. Well, that was one of my other foolish notions. I'm really involved about 7 days and 7 nights now, and I have not taken a picture since the place opened. I gave myself 5 years to get it off my back onto other people's backs. I do have a good staff now, and one of my major announcements last December, before we managed to take off on a vacation, which I did not do for 2 years before that, I announced to my staff that it seems to me like we're almost near to the point where if a car ran me over, the place would not fall apart, to which they all applauded. So I think with something...
Do you have an exhibition in mind?
Well, something's by now happened. Well, the joke is, of course, that given 2 more years, most likely, my dream of taking 3 months off or being away and all that, it will not make that much difference.
But it will make a difference to you. What kind of exhibition would you do? What kind of photographs would you take?
Well, I really have no idea. I'm so incredibly, this is an interesting point what you're making, all sorts of ways. As a photographer, I always enjoyed being the conductor of a project. I was one of the photographers in the project, but I had 4, 5, 6, 20 partners in it. And all of us made up that thing that made the exhibition work. Running this particular institution with its education program and the exhibition program, I have a richest photographic experience I could ever expect. So I just exchanged